What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. We're doing a follow-up video today because I did have a comment on the video where I made the superstar abilities, or I discussed the best superstar abilities for coverage players in Madden 20, and I had a comment that said that we should do defensive linemen next, and I agree. We're going to cover defensive linemen next, and there are a couple reasons why we're going to cover defensive linemen, and the main of those reasons is the simple fact that superstar abilities are probably the most effective on defensive linemen. Now, there are other positions that benefit a lot from the superstar abilities. However, defensive linemen are probably the ones that benefit the most. The one thing that we're going to have to discuss, though, is the difference between types of defensive linemen, because you're going to need to know, are you trying to have a player be a pass rusher, or are you trying to have a player be a run stopper? And even within that, as a pass rusher, you can have a guy that's a speed rusher, a power rusher, or you could have, in terms of the run stopping game, you could have somebody that you're just trying to have clog holes and take up blocks, which is more of a 3-4 type of deal, or you could have guys that are, trying to block shed, for example, and stop the run defensively that way. And so there are a lot of good traits out there for all of these different things, and we're going to try and discuss some of the best ones here today. And we'll start with the interior defensive linemen. Pretty much all of these guys that you'll see here on the list are, for the most part, they're going to be run stuffers. And there are a couple guys here that are a little bit more pass rush oriented. Some of these guys that have good finesse moves and stuff like that. Guys like DeForest Buckner. Chris Jones does a decent job of rushing the passer, and so do some of these other guys like Fletcher Cox, Kenny Clark, Cam Hayward, who is moved to D-tackle in this franchise, and guys like that. And actually, Shaq Lawson on my team does a pretty good job of it because he is a pretty speedy player. And so these guys do a pretty solid job of generating pressure as D-tackles, but for the most part, these guys are also going to be run stuffers, and that's a big part of their responsibility as interior defensive linemen, is to stop the run. And so we want to look at what are some of the better traits for essentially doing that. And then once we get to the edge players, the defensive ends and stuff, then we'll start to talk a little bit more about the pass rushing ones, but we might hit on it a little bit here in here. And so right now I'm actually in the Bills franchise that we've discussed multiple times, and a great example of a superstar trait that's going to help you guys out a lot as a interior defensive lineman is actually going to be Shaq Lawson. So if we look at Shaq Lawson, he's an 87 overall, 89 with the confidence boost, so he only has one superstar ability, but it is the goal line stuff ability, and I absolutely love having this ability on Shaq Lawson. I got really lucky having this, and the reason being is very, very simple, very straightforward, and you guys can see the benefit, and I'm sure you can imagine the benefit right away by looking at the description. It says defenders with this ability use faster run shed moves for a better chance at shedding blocks within 5 yards of the goal line. I can't tell you how many times he gets off a block and stops a run up the middle on the goal line, and that is one of the best things you can have with a defensive lineman. One of the things that this actually allows you to do on the goal line is not have to stack the box quite so hard, because if you have guys that can get off their blocks and make a tackle in the backfield or stop a running back from getting into the end zone, then you can commit more guys to covering receivers or covering tight ends or whatever it might be. And that can be really helpful on the goal line, especially when you're playing other users. And so goal line stuff is really, really helpful to have on a player that is, any defensive lineman it would be nice to have on. Mainly it's going to be more effective for, interior defensive linemen, because if the run is going to the outside on the goal line, you're going to need speed to stop it. If the run's going up the middle on the goal line, it's going to be your interior defensive linemen that are going to shed blocks and get to that. So really good trait to have. It is not, it's one of those things that is a very specialized trait. So it's not going to give you the most benefit because it's not effective, 90% of the time. It's only going to be available to you when you're within 5 yards of the goal line, but it's really nice to have when you actually do get into those situations. But let's go ahead and sort in the entire NFL and look at some of the other players and look at some of the traits that they have that actually make them really effective. And one of the players that I like to look at is Chris Jones, because Chris Jones absolute monster. Any league that you see him in, he's probably doing work for you. There are some other good players like Michael Pierce. I had Michael Pierce in this franchise at one point in time, and he did absolutely nothing for me. And so we're going to compare some of their traits and see if what they're doing in terms of their abilities is actually affecting things. So one of the traits that I like to have quite a bit is the under pressure trait for any defensive lineman, because what it does is it allows them to have the ability to apply pressure to the quarterback from a greater distance. Now this is really effective for defensive tackles and interior defensive linemen. The reason being for that is that they're less likely to get to the quarterback. They have to deal with double teams more often. They don't have the rush around the edge. You know, they're going to be further away from the quarterback. A lot of times they're going to be trying to get pressure on the quarterback without being able to have a direct line to them. They're going to have somebody on them, and they're going to be trying to basically bull rush their way to the quarterback. Well, if you have the ability where you can pressure them from farther away, that's going to allow your D tackles to have more of an impact, because they're not going to be as close to the quarterback all the time. And so being able to pressure them from farther away allows them to still have an impact even when they're not getting close to the quarterback necessarily, and that is a really nice benefit to have, and this is one that is going to affect you a lot with interior defensive linemen. This is something that is good to have on your edge rushers, because, you know, on the attempts where they're not actually getting all the way to the quarterback, they are still applying pressure because they are getting close to them. But it's not really as effective, in my opinion, with edge rushers, because they're either getting there or they're getting really close to the quarterback, and so the whole extra range thing doesn't usually come into play for edge rushers or defensive ends. So I definitely prefer to have this trait on an interior defensive lineman. And then the trait that I like to have, and let me preface this by saying I generally prefer to have power rushers at pretty much all of my defensive line positions. I don't mind to have a really good finesse pass rusher, but I prefer to have power rushers because I just feel like the move is more effective. I feel like you get more pressure that way. You can be more disruptive in the backfield with power moves. And so I really like to have the power specialist trait, and I actually do have that on a couple of my defensive linemen. If we go ahead and look at Ed Oliver, I believe he has power specialist. Yeah, so he has power specialist, which is really nice to have because it makes his power move absolutely OP. And so that is one of the best ones to have if you're going for that type of pass rush move, which is something that I'm generally doing with all of my defensive linemen. I'm going for power specialist. That is one of my favorite ones to have on any of my defensive linemen. I like that quite a bit. Now let's go ahead and look at Michael Pierce and see the traits that he has. Michael Pierce has Secure Tackler and Enforcer. These aren't good to have on your defensive lineman. Enforcer, defenders with this ability don't allow broken tackles when hit-sticking ball carriers. When are you ever going to be hit-sticking somebody with your D-tackle? And if you are tackling with your D-tackle, when are they ever going to break your tackle? And then Secure Tackler, likewise, defenders with this ability have an increased success rate when using conservative or diving tackles. When is anybody ever going to break away from your... How heavy is he? When is somebody going to break away from your 360-pound defensive tackle? If he has him within arm's reach, they're going down to the ground one way or another. So having abilities like this are completely ineffective for defensive linemen. Maybe for edge defensive linemen, these things could be a little bit useful for you. But what you guys might have seen is that I actually have, I believe, Secure Tackler on Ed Oliver, and that's kind of a waste, you know. Having Secure Tackler on a guy like this just doesn't help, because the only situation that this could really help in is if you're going against a quarterback that breaks a lot of sacks. But when you have a guy that's this good anyway, when you have a guy that's a superstar, chances are the quarterback's not going to be breaking his sack anyway. So it's kind of a useless trait to have on your defensive linemen. So definitely try to shy away from aiming for Secure Tackler and stuff like that. What you want to do is you want to try and progress your guys so that they're leading as a power rusher or speed rusher archetype, and that's what's going to influence the traits that they get primarily. If you upgrade your guy as a run stopper, then they're going to get traits like Secure Tackler and Unfakeable and stuff like that, like Michael Pierce has, because that's what Michael Pierce is. He's a run stopper, and so he gets the run stopping type of traits where people can't escape his tackles. Well, that's really not effective, because they're not going to escape his tackles regardless because of how big he is and how good he is at tackling and how good he is at stopping the run. So don't try to aim for abilities like that. They're really not that helpful. Let's go ahead and look at a couple other traits that people have in here that can be useful for interior defensive linemen. Fletcher Cox is somebody that gets a lot of pressure. He has the same abilities. He has under pressure and power specialist. Like I said, these are probably two of the best, if not the best, abilities that you can have. They're useful most of the time. They're really going to be helping you out, and so definitely be looking for things like that. We'll look at Kenny Clark, and then I think we'll look at DeForest Buckner as well. Kenny Clark has Reach Elite. Now, this is one that is really helpful to have as a run stopper. This is one that is actually helpful to have as an interior defensive lineman or as a run stopper. Defenders with this ability can reach out of engaged blocks to tackle or sack nearby ball carriers. This is really, really helpful because, you know, generally speaking, there's going to be somebody engaged with a block with your interior defensive lineman pretty much no matter what. They're never going to have a free shot at the quarterback. There's going to be somebody there to pick them up. And so being able to tackle somebody or sack the quarterback while you're also still engaged is really, really useful for interior defensive linemen. On top of that, being able to reach out and tackle the running back as he goes by you, even when you're engaged with blocks, is really helpful because this guy's a space eater. He can eat a block and still make a play on the ball carrier that's going by him without a problem. So this is a ability that is useful pretty much 100% of the time. This is definitely one of the best possible traits that you could get. It allows for more secure tackling. It allows for him to make more plays. It is not going to get you, you know, super good pass rush moves or anything like the power elite or anything like that does, but it is a really, really helpful ability to have, and one that I would like to have a lot. Now, this is one of those trade-offs where if you upgrade your guy as a run stopper, you have the chance of getting reach elite, but I think it's less likely to get this, and so you might end up with worse traits. So it's kind of a trade-off there, whether you want this or you want something else. I try and shy away from it, even though it's a really good trait. I just don't want some of those other bad run-stopping type of traits because they're just really not that helpful, even though this one is really, really good. The other trait here is Run Stopper. Defenders with this ability can either shed or reach out of engaged blocks to tackle nearby ball carriers. This one is kind of the same as Reach Elite. It's really helpful. It is useful, and getting one or the other is really good, and having this combination makes him a really, really powerful run stopper because it basically means that when the ball carrier is near him or whoever has the ball is near him, he can pretty much just get rid of that guy and tackle the ball carrier. The only problem is if you're playing in a league like we have where the speed threshold is up, having a guy that can get off the blocks and stuff like this isn't always going to be helpful for you because of his speed. He's only got, I guess we can't see it here, I have to go out there. He's only got 70 speed, so a lot of the time the running back's going to get by him anyway. But what these traits will do is they will allow him to react faster, essentially. They'll allow him to get in the way. And what you'll notice is when you play a guy like Kenny Clark, or you have a guy like Kenny Clark on your team, even when your speed thresholds are changed like ours are, he will make a lot more plays than just any other defensive tackle will because of those traits that he has. So those are really nice traits to have as a run-stopping defensive interior lineman. I really wouldn't recommend having them as an exterior defensive lineman. You know, this is a run-stopping type of trait only. Then let's go ahead and look at DeForest Buckner. He's probably going to have pass-rushing type traits. Yeah, he's finesse specialist. This is what you want to have if you're trying to have finesse players. You know, generally speaking, this, in my opinion, isn't that effective for interior defensive linemen. I would reserve, you know, upgrading my player as a finesse type of player for an edge lineman. But what you could do if you have a player like this at D-tackle, if you have DeForest Buckner, is I would move him to defensive end and move somebody else to D-tackle, personally speaking, because he's not going to be as effective in the run game. He will be effective in the pass rush game, but he's going to face a lot of double teams, and so that limits his ability to actually get to the quarterback. And then he has Strip Specialist. Strip Specialist is a nice trait to have on pretty much anybody, but it can get you into trouble. You know, if you're trying to strip the ball with a player, you can end up with a lot of face masks. So, you know, if he does get onto a ball carrier, he will try to strip the ball. But that's kind of a it's kind of a neutral thing for me because it could result in some face mask penalties that I don't want because your guys are trying to go for strip animations when they shouldn't be. You know, I would stick to your pass rush specialist traits and stick to trying to get your run stopper type of traits like I showed you guys. Honestly speaking, I would stick to trying to upgrade your guys' pass rushers first, just because those traits are way more helpful than the run stopping traits are. Like I said, it's much less likely that you're going to get some of these really good traits like run stopper and reach elite. You're more likely going to get these pretty bad traits that Michael Pierce has, like secure tackler and enforcer. Those things are much better on like linebackers and whatnot. They're not very good on defensive linemen. Now let's go ahead and look at some edge players. We'll look at Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is by far the best player at rushing in the game. It's not even close. I mean, this guy will literally destroy. And I should preface this by saying, in terms of defensive linemen, there are some outside linebackers, like Khalil Mack is classified as an outside linebacker that might get more sacks than him. But Aaron Donald, he has the best combination of physical attributes, intangible attributes, and he actually has the best traits that you could possibly have. The best trait that you could possibly get as a pass rushing type of defensive lineman is pass rush elite. Defenders with this ability use faster pass rush moves for a better chance at shedding pass blocks. This is effective because this goes towards both your power move and your finesse move, and so it's much like what we went over in the pass coverage thing, where there's a trait that covers both versus a trait that just covers finesse move and a trait that just covers power move. This is really effective for a guy like this that has the capability of both doing a power move and a finesse move. You're not going to get a whole lot of guys like this, but if you can develop a player into something like this, you're really going to want to have this pass rush elite trait, because it's going to positively affect both of their abilities, both their finesse move and power move, and that's going to make them a lot more effective. And then he has the combination of under pressure, which is nice to have because he can apply pressure pretty much from wherever he is. I would rather have a different trait on here. I would rather have maybe I don't know, one of the traits that I identified before. We can go over some of the other good pass rush traits, but I would rather have something else other than under pressure on him, just for the fact that Aaron Donald is basically in the quarterback's face no matter what. And so under pressure, having that extra distance doesn't really help, because it's going to be very few and far between plays where he's far enough away from the quarterback that he would benefit from the greater distance that they say here. And hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And so some of the other traits that I'd rather have on him, I think Myles Garrett has some good traits. I would rather have something like, no, he's got unfakeable, but he does have pass rush elite. Nick Bosa is really good. Strip specialist. Strip specialist is nice from a pass rushing perspective because it means that they're going to go for the strip on the quarterback when they sack them. You'll notice guys like Nick Bosa forcing strip fumbles, and those can be really helpful to your team because it sets you up in good field position, or you could return them for touchdowns. So definitely don't scoff at strip specialist, but I would be looking to get the combination of pass rush elite. That's where we want edge threat elite. So defenders with this ability use dominant pass rush moves and apply significant quarterback pressure while rushing from the edge of the defense. Now, I don't know that I've ever really seen anybody gain this trait. I don't know if this is something that is just specific to TJ or JJ Watt, but the edge rush elite is super, super effective. It essentially makes him like invincible as a pass rusher. He's just constantly shedding blocks. He's constantly getting into the backfield, constantly causing pressure on the quarterback. So edge threat elite and pass rush elite are the two best traits that you could possibly get. They're basically the same thing from what I can understand. I don't know if it's possible to get both of them, and as you guys can see, he also has strip specialist, so that combination is pretty nice. I'd rather have the strip specialist just because that allows you to force more turnovers, but those are pretty much what the best traits are. You want to try and focus on trying to get one of those pass rush specialists, or at least you want to get see, even Danielle Hunter has reach elite. You really want to get one of your specialists towards your specific type of move. So Ed Oliver specifically is good at power moves, not very good at finesse moves, and so you know, it wouldn't help me as much to have like pass rush elite. I wouldn't get any added benefit to it because his finesse move is already bad. So, you know, the added bonus doesn't really help me. So I get the same amount of bonus out of having power specialist. So, you know, you want to try to at least get power specialist or finesse specialist on your guys. But like I said, the best traits to have on your pass rushing types of defensive linemen are going to be the pass rush elite and the edge rush elite. Those are going to be the most effective ones for you. Under pressure is good. I prefer to have that on my interior defensive linemen, but it can't hurt to have it on your exterior defensive linemen. You know, reason being is that pretty much for a guy like Aaron Donald, it means that no matter where he's at, he's going to be getting pressure on the quarterback because he's either going to be in the quarterback's face or he's going to be somewhere nearby. You know, that extra range is going to take over and get him pressure on the quarterback. So that's what you want to get in terms of your superstar abilities. Obviously, you can't really decide what your player is going to get. You know, like I showed you guys with my players, Ed Oliver, for example, he got, secure tackler, which really isn't all that helpful. You know, if I could have chosen to, I would have gotten another trait. And I think the reason that he got secure tackler was because of the fact that he was a pretty good run stopper at that point in time. And I think that his rating at run stopper might have been higher than his power rush grade. And I think that that's really what goes into impacting which superstar abilities you get. So the moral of the story here, the moral and summary of this whole video is try to focus on keeping your pass rush grade slightly higher than your run stopper grade. Whether it's a power rusher or a speed rusher, keep that grade slightly higher than your run stopper, because if you don't, you might end up with some of those useless abilities, and there are quite a few useless abilities to have on defensive linemen. You really want those pass rush ones, and in order to focus on getting those, you want to make sure that your guy's better at pass rushing. So hopefully this helps you guys out in some way. If there's another position group that you guys want me to go over and give you guys some examples on what my players have and what are the best ones out there to actually get, let me know down in the comment section. Let me know by leaving a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel here if you're new. As always, let me know what you guys want to see next down in the comment section. I'm getting a lot of great comments lately, and I have a lot of videos lined up. So I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope you guys have a great night.